Okay, so for my latest adventure on this MGA, I discovered this problem, which I'm going to zoom in on here, where you can see that the flanges, where the transmission tunnel meets the crossmember inside the cockpit, on both sides have eroded away in the center there, and you see these little holes on parts of it where the flange goes over. Now the flanges, for the most part of it, are decent. I also have a similar problem with flanges in the rear part. This transmission tunnel is actually two pieces. We're looking at the rear part of it now, there, and the front part. And both have flanges that sit down on the floorboard supports, and both have places where the flanges have eroded. So I'm going to take the transmission tunnel out, and I've already taken it out actually. I just put it in there to show you this. I've taken it out and cleaned it up, and we're going to see if we're going to try to repair these flanges good as new. Now, one other thing to tell you about with this is that it was not easy getting this transmission tunnel out. And the problem is that the bolts that go through the front flanges and the bottom flanges up in the front there and near the toe board on both sides, and especially over here in the back, right in here, the flange there that goes in through the wood in the back and into the frame supports are all attached with Phillips head, kind of like almost like a wood screw, but they're of course steel screws going into weld nuts on the other side. And up in the front cockpit towards the top I was able to get them loose, but the ones at the bottom closer to the ground where it gets all the rust, and especially the ones in the back, none of them would come loose. I tried soaking them for a long time. So just a little tip, what I ended up doing was getting underneath there, reaching up and cutting them off with this type of Dremel tool and a cutoff tool. Now you can't reach everything. Sometimes you have to, even though it's not recommended to go in, you want to go in at a 90-degree angle, cut something off over here, slide it in that way. Sometimes you can't always do that. I had to actually go in at an angle and kind of cut away pieces of the weld nut. And in many cases what I had to do was cut away as much of the weld nut as I could, and I just could not get a flush cut with that. And then what I did was I took well, this isn't the one, but I took little tools like that, little grinding Dremel tools. They're smaller, so they can get up in the tight spots. And I grind away the rest of the weld nut till you get to the point where you can see. You do this from the back side, not where the head of the screw is. And you get to the point where you get it almost flush with the metal it was originally welded to, and you see a little round. You start to see a little round, shiny area, which is actually where the ends of the threads are ground away. And in that case, once you get to that point, you can see a little circle there. That's actually the bolt. You put a punch on it, hit it with a hammer blow, and it ping, pops right out. It's very time consuming. If you can cut the whole thing off flush, you can maybe cut it off in 20 minutes. But what typically happens is you have to hack away at it, get at it at different angles, and finally I was able to get all the ones that I couldn't get loose, which was about all four in the back here, over here. Had to cut all four of those. In some cases I had to reach in from here to cut them. Most cases I got underneath the car and reached up. Very confined spaces. I wish I'd have done this before I welded in the new battery box on the passenger side of the car, because that was in the way when I went to cut these off. I wasn't going to cut those off when I put the battery box in, but then I got more ambitious and more fussy as I went along and got more confident in my ability to fix things. So anyway, I got them out. It's very difficult. It's very time consuming, But it's a good lesson in perseverance, and if you really want to do something and you're willing to take as long as it takes and take your time, and when you get frustrated, go away from it and come back the next day, this is proof that the transmission tunnel can be removed. Here's the transmission tunnel removed from the car and cleaned up. And I'll show you what I have to deal with here on these flanges. I'm going to pick it up, so hold on one second. So you can see what I'm dealing with. Okay, now the flange is pretty solid up to here, and it's eroded here. This section actually has a bend over. That fits into the rubber supports that go over the cross member inside the cockpit, the forward cross member. And here, this is a support piece that is welded to the inside. I'm going to try to preserve that and cut this flange out here. I was going to try to repair it from here forward. It seems to be a straight shot to right here. So here's a quick update on my progress on repairing the transmission tunnel flanges. You can see the first repair over here on the far side, and what I did along the bottom was I made a flange and welded in from the outside with spot welds, plug welds. This piece also had has a flange underneath over here and was welded in from underneath, again with plug welds. This piece here is the cutout that goes through the cross member inside the cockpit, and I had to bend a piece over from this piece and weld it onto what was left of that flange that bends around for the centerpiece in the cross member in the cockpit. Here's the way I did it. Just made a pattern. In this case, I didn't realize when I was making this pattern that I wanted to have a piece bent over, so I just made it a little bit bigger in this area, right here, and then cut it to fit over here. So that was that. Same technique over here on this one. Same problems. Let's see. That one went in like that. So I mark it where I want to have a flange. I know from working with my puncher and my flanger tool that 7/16 inch over here is just right to give me the flange and room for the holes that I weld into. And I measured this flange. It's about 1/8 of an inch, 1 and 1/8. I use just any old piece of wood. In this case, I've got a level to go across, so that when I make a pattern, it's at the right height. Okay, now the latest work I'm doing over here, and hopefully the last one on this, is a final piece here. Same technique. As you can see, I've built the pattern. It's so much easier to build a pattern initially, in paper. I've got it just right here, so when I bend it over, it'll conform to what's left of the original flange for the opening for the cross member. Over here, where it's going in, that the metal has not yet been cleaned up. I clean it up on both sides, underneath here, all around. I'll grind it with a flap disc, being careful not to take off as little material as possible while getting a good clean metal surface to weld to. And I'll do it on both sides. I'll cut the piece, I'll clean it up, and then I'll weld it after that. Okay, so here is the completed transmission tunnel with all the flanges that needed repair welded. And the last one I showed you was this piece over here. And that is now welded in, made a nice connection over here. And I've tried something a little bit different. I've used this, usually I've been using Eastwood seam sealer all around edges. But in this case, I bought some Permatex liquid metal filler. And it seems to do a similar job. I tried the metal filler because I had a couple of holes, small holes over here, and rather than try to weld holes are really tough, and I figured I'd give this stuff a try, and if it didn't make a good surface that seems to be strong, then I would have to cut it out and make another repair piece. So this has actually been filled in with this metal filler. Cures in about 3 hours, and I'm quite happy with the results. I'm going to leave that because these were just a couple of minor holes. It's very difficult to weld up holes in sheet metal, and that looks like it's going to do a good job. There's nothing real structural over here. This is just to keep it from leaking when it's under the car into the car. Of course, the carpet goes over this, and before I put the carpet on it, I'm going to put some heat shield material. In fact, you can see some of it sitting right there in the garage, waiting to go. That'll go over this after it's all installed. Okay, so back to this repair. This one is nice and solid. I had found that this weld through here on this flange was a little weak, so I re-welded it and also did a little seam weld on the top. And I've sealed all the seams with this metal filler. I found this and also the Eastwood seam sealer. They seem to work equivalent, but I suspect this one might be a better choice for what I did over here with filling the holes. Now, since I got finished with all of that, I went through with my flap disc and ground all the loose rust off the inside and outside of this thing. That took about an hour each side, hour on the inside, an hour on the outside. So it's a little bit laborious, but there's very little surface rust left. Then what I did was I treated it with this rust remover stuff. Now there's two kinds. They're essentially, as far as I can tell, the same product. The one I had, the oldest, is this POR 15 metal ready rust remover and pre-primer for metal painting. The other one that seems to be similar is this Eastwood Fast Etch. They both leave this gray stuff on the surface of a formerly rusty part. That is a zinc phosphate coating ready for primer. So those are the products I've used. Here's the top piece of the tunnel that goes over where the shifter comes through, and two braces that go underneath are sitting here soaking in this metal ready stuff. Now this stuff is reusable. It gets the metal. It doesn't do a super job of derusting products. So it's very good for little parts. And in something big like this, you brush it on and put something underneath it in the garage. It makes a little bit of a white mess where you were doing it. I had paper over there and it went through the paper a little bit. And over on small parts, smaller parts, you can do really great with nuts and bolts and small brackets. I've got two brackets in here, which I don't think you can see because they're soaking in this metal ready stuff. And this is the piece that goes on top. And that will cause it, once those come out of there, they've been wire brushed and everything, and the remaining rust that's left on there will, if not melted away, will at least be neutralized and left into this zinc phosphate. I've been doing that as my standard rust prevention procedure, and then I'm going to paint this with Rust-Oleum Paint Over Rust Primer, which is this. Hold on a second. I'm about to do that. That's that stuff. It's much stronger than the regular Rust-Oleum primer. It's designed for rusty metal primer. I don't put it on metal if it's not rusty, but something in these conditions, I put it on. It comes out red, and then I top coat it. I'm going to top coat it with a couple, with some excess Rust-Oleum gray primer that I have here, and then I'll top coat it with some Rust-Oleum black, and it's going to look beautiful when done. I'll show you that when I'm finished. Okay, so here is the finished repaired transmission tunnel. This is the side that has two patches. If you look really closely, you can see the patches. They're very solid, but keep in mind that over here we're going to have heat shield and carpeting going over this. So everything is solid, and this repair is completed.